Welcome back. As I said earlier, researchers are beginning to notice the entertainment industry's contribution to Nigeria's cultural and economic development, as well as our influence on the global scene. Well, the question is Nigeria tapping into the full potentials of these factors? Joining me now on Skype to look at this issue is a professor of ethnomusicology and African studies at the University of Colorado at Boulder, USA, Dr. Austin Okibo. Good morning, Dr. Okibo. Thank you for joining us on Business Morning.
It's my pleasure, and good morning to all your viewers in Nigeria.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have done a lot of studies on Nigeria's entertainment industry. Now, what is it in this industry that drives its international appeal?
Very good question. Well, first of all, it's not just Nollywood that is thriving beyond the shores of Nigeria. In fact, the music industry is also big. As a matter of fact, the stand-up comedy is gradually also beginning to gain prominence internationally. But generally, what is driving the industry is the content, which has very strong local and indigenous grounding that speaks to the shared socio-cultural sensibilities of Black people and Africans everywhere. In fact, the indigenous content is so much informed by the social, political, economic, and I would say to a great extent the environmental dynamics that articulate with the experience of not just Nigerians, but the peoples of Africa and Black people around the world, especially in the Caribbean. So you'll be surprised to see then how much some of the Nigerian actors have become very famous in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, or even the British Guyana. So largely it's the content.
Okay, now do you think the players in this industry have got the capacity to drive the industry on the global market?
Could you repeat the question? I think it was...
Do you think the players in this industry have got the capacity to drive that growth in the global market?
Oh, sure. Because they are becoming famous, and of course, more and more of them are beginning to not just feature in Nigerian entertainment industry. Some of them are beginning to collaborate with producers and studios in the United States, in Hollywood. I know that in 2009, there was the ION summit that was held in Port Harcourt, where there was a shared initiative for a collaboration between Nollywood and Bollywood. So that the kind of partnership that we're beginning to see that is occurring between the actors in Nigeria, the players in Nigeria, the participants in Nigeria, and other participants from other countries like the United States and Hollywood or even Bollywood is already a good sign that, and a clear indicator that these actors and participants have a lot of potentials that will benefit the Nigerian entertainment industry.
All right. The Nigerian government had earmarked 3 billion naira for capacity building with an initial 300 million naira payment. How do you see this government action as a viable option that will potentially grow the sector for the national development?
Oh, first of all, let me say that what the federal government has done is a step in the right direction, especially because it's diagnostic of their recognition of the importance, the economic and cultural importance of the industry. But there is a shortcoming that I will observe here, being that the financial intervention is kind of directed at Nollywood, meaning that all the other parts of the industry, of the sector, would not be benefiting directly from this. And yet, they're supposed to be, these different segments of the industry are not supposed to be separated. Now, it means that in Nigeria, we are still thinking about the industry not as an integrated segment, not as an integrated sector. But the different segments are not supposed to be separated. So by focusing on one part of the industry, we may, without realizing it, be creating a hierarchical structure in the industry, which can have which could be potentially problematic. But another potential problem that I see could arise from whether or not the government has actually put in place a mechanism for assessing and monitoring the outcome of the financial intervention and the finance that they're injecting into the industry. I would be hard-pressed to believe that they have not thought about that, especially with a person like Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala being at the helm of affairs. So, in light of that, I have one caveat that I want to sound here, that the government must be careful to not let this be a precedence whereby any sector could be coming up in the future with hearts in hand, looking for some type of stimulus money from the government. That said, I am nevertheless encouraged that our government is at least paying attention to the industry and what it can offer, and being proactive at the same time by doing something about it. So I would say, however, to do more, that the government probably needs to do more in the area of policy formulation that will create an enabling environment for us to fully harness the potentials of the sector.
Well, Dr. Okibo, before we get to that policy formulation, we have a problem here, a problem of unemployment rate here in Nigeria. Now, does this industry, I mean, you have been doing a lot of research here in Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, and you've been looking at some of these, industries. Does this industry in Nigeria have the capacity of helping curb this problem?
It is already helping. In fact, the United Nations estimates of, unfortunately, we're still working with the data that was issued in between 2008 and 2009. But at least based on that data, what we have, it's estimated that, for instance, Nollywood alone is employing about 1 million people in Nigeria. And I would believe that since 2008, 2009, much more employment has been added in the sector. It's just a matter of tracking it. So, 20 years ago, 10, even 15 years ago, we probably wouldn't have imagined the entertainment industry to be one of the largest employers in the country. And so, it's already bringing positive results in that regard.
Okay. Now, besides injecting money for capacity building, you were talking about policy formulation. So what kind of policy formulation does the government need to put in place to ensure that the country harnesses the full potential of the sector?
Well, people often talk about enacting and enforcing adequate copyright laws to mitigate, pirating products of the entertainment industry. To me, that will always remain true, and I think that some good anti-piracy laws have already been enacted in Nigeria. The problem is that we do not have adequate enforcement mechanism, one. Two, there should be periodic revisiting of these laws in order to identify loopholes that may have been there that were unforeseen at the time of the enactment of some of these anti-piracy laws. However, one thing that is lacking, however, for now is the requisite infrastructure for delivering the products and services in a manner that will foreclose against the acts of piracy, such as putting in place a digital platform for streaming, as well as using digital encoding that will prevent people from overly copying products of that are coming from the industry. But let me say one thing. For me, the more viable policy formulation ought to begin by conducting a comprehensive assessment of the volume and economic value of the industry. Right now, like I said a moment ago, the data that we have is still the data that was an estimate that came from the United Nations in 2008, 2009. But if we can do a thorough assessment of what the volume of this industry is in terms of its economic value, then the next step will be to put a mechanism in place for revenue collection. And I'm not an expert in tax revenue, so I will leave that to those who know better how to deal with that. But one other area that the government policy could help I think, is with regards to it would be for government to, to create an enabling environment that will and incentivize the sector in such a way that the private sector can begin to invest, can begin to collaborate. Right now, I don't know how many of the studios in Nigeria are currently listed in the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, unlike here in the United States, where a lot of the studios like Univision, Disney, and others are all listed in the stock in this world, then they go public. Then people begin to buy shares, and the investors' capitals will be insured. Right now, the operation in Nigeria is as if they are still in the informal economic sector. So there's no way to track how these things are happening. And so even private investors, private entrepreneurs are kind of not feeling secure to invest and insert themselves into the system.
All right, we hope to get there, Dr. Austin. Thank you very much, Dr. Austin, for being part of this program. Have a very good day. Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Austin Okibo. He is a professor of ethnomusicology and African studies at the University of Colorado at Boulder,